There is no loss in divine mind. Therefore, there can be no debt in truth. You may believe you owe the world more than it can ever return to you. You may feel the tightening grip of unpaid bills, looming deadlines, or the silent weight of owing, whether to banks, people, or time. You may fear that something is closing in, but fear is never innocent. It is always a signal of misplaced faith, and the fear of debt is no exception. In the spiritual realm, every word is a decree. Every emotion sustained is a broadcast. Every belief is a claim. When you live in fear of debt, you are not simply worried, you are speaking. You are affirming that God cannot pay, that the law does not return, that lack has the right to linger. This is not about morality. This is not about mistakes. This is about spiritual misalignment, pure and simple. I have seen it many times. A man receives money, and instead of thanking the law, he fears the next bill. A woman is paid, and she does not bless the payment. She braces for the shortfall. The subconscious hears one thing: I am not safe in the hands of divine order. And what the subconscious hears, it records. And what it records, the law obeys. Let me be clear. Debt is not a punishment. It is not a cosmic sentence passed down for sins unremembered. It is a visible form of imbalance, a ledger not of numbers, but of faith. It is the echo of having received without honoring the source, or having withheld where you were meant to give. Debt is the receipt of energy exchanged out of harmony with law, and that can be corrected, but fear cannot correct it. Fear compounds it. Fear reaffirms it. Every time you say, I don't know how I'll pay this, you affirm that God is limited. Every time you say, I'm drowning in debt, you decree that you are separate from the infinite stream. These are not metaphors. These are legal structures in spiritual law. You are not merely speaking about debt, you are re-signing the contract. And so I say again, fear is not passive. It is not something that happens to you. Fear is a form of worship. When you fear your creditors, you are bowing to them. When you panic before payment, you are anointing lack as your Lord. And the law, which does not negotiate, which does not feel bad, will deliver what you have honored. Do not confuse this with guilt. This is not about condemnation. This is about exactness. You are not being punished for debt. You are living under the law you confirmed. If you confirmed lack, it was not through poverty, but through belief. If you confirmed delay, it was not through error, but through fear. And if you confirmed debt, it was not through spending, but through the absence of spoken authority. You see, divine law does not deal in scarcity. It knows only perfect return. It governs by symmetry, by restoration, by exact compensation. If something appears lost, it is because you have not yet opened the channel through which return may come. That channel is the word. Not panic, not worry, not a vague sense of hope. The spoken word in alignment with truth is the only mechanism through which the law moves. It cannot move through contradiction. Let me say it plainly. You cannot say, I'm afraid, and I am supplied, in the same breath, and expect heaven to act. One of the most dangerous patterns I have seen in those who fear debt is this. They begin to manage their fear instead of replacing it. They try to feel better about their lack. They call it surrender. But it is not surrender. It is rehearsal. They are rehearsing bondage, rehearsing insufficiency, rehearsing compromise. And the subconscious, ever faithful, makes it real. You cannot outpray a fear you continue to repeat in your speech. You cannot out-visualize a belief you keep confirming in your tone. You cannot out-donate a law you refuse to replace. If you wish to break free from debt, you must not fight it. You must override it. You must declare a new law, not casually, not wishfully, but legally. You must say, debt is not my portion. I pay in full, and I am paid in full by divine compensation. This is not imagination. This is law. Even now you may feel resistance. But Florence, you say, I really am in debt. I do owe money. Yes, but do you know what else you owe? You owe yourself the truth. You owe the law a new command. You owe your own life the dignity of no longer bowing to fear. For every bill there is a supply. For every invoice a provision. For every need a lawful answer, if you speak it. And so let us begin with this. From this moment forward, I revoke all agreements with fear. I no longer negotiate with debt. I acknowledge only the law of right exchange, perfect return, and immediate supply. And it is done. Speak that not as a hope, but as a verdict. Because when fear speaks, the law obeys. But when truth speaks, fear dissolves. The law is waiting. Speak. Debt is not a curse. It is a symptom. It is not evil. It is imbalance, nothing more, nothing less. And like all spiritual imbalance, it is resolved not by punishment, not by effort, but by exact alignment with law. The law of right exchange governs all form, not just money, not just time, but every flow of energy between giving and receiving. This law is impersonal. It does not prefer the rich nor pity the poor. It does not interpret intent nor calculate morality. It only returns what has been set in motion. Man is not in debt because he is wicked. Man is in debt when he has received without acknowledgement, withheld when he was commanded to give, or feared what he was meant to bless. Debt is never random. It appears where the cycle of exchange has been interrupted. And the law will not restore balance through sentiment. It will wait for command. You were not meant to live under debt. You were meant to move in rhythm. Give when called, receive without guilt, speak supply into every obligation, and govern your substance with your word. Yet many live in debt not because they owe, but because they forget. They forget that every act of giving must be clean, that fear is not a source, that compensation is not earned but invoked, that repayment is not a weight on the back, but a decree from the tongue. Debt cannot remain where the word has ruled. But where fear is spoken, debt becomes law. I have seen people work endlessly to get out of debt, but still live under the tyranny of it. Not because of numbers on a page, but because of subconscious decrees repeated daily. I'll never get ahead. This will take years to pay. I'm drowning in bills. These phrases are not neutral. They are covenants, and the law, being just, will enforce every one. Debt persists not because creditors are cruel, but because spiritual rhythm is broken. Where there is no trust in return, hoarding begins. Where there is no blessing of receipt, guilt takes root. And where guilt grows, self-punishment follows. Debt is one such punishment, a consequence not of sin, but of misalignment. The world teaches that money is external, but the law reveals money is an extension of speech. Your account does not begin in your wallet. It begins in your word. What you say after receiving determines if that money will multiply or vanish. What you declare before payment determines if the obligation will submit or persist. You are not in debt because of numbers. You are in debt because of spiritual structure. One woman came to me frantic. She owed several thousands and saw no way forward. She said, "Florence, I've tried everything. Affirmations, side work, budgeting, but she had not tried the law. She had tried tactics without correction. She had spoken strategy but withheld spiritual alignment." I told her, "You are not behind. You are only misaligned. Begin by declaring that the law has already provided, and dare to say, every debt is now wiped out through divine compensation. I am paid in full, and I pay in full by spiritual law." She resisted. "But that isn't true yet," she said. I replied, "It was never about what is true in the world. It is about what is true in divine mind. And divine mind holds no record of debt, only records of order." Within weeks, channels opened, not because she worked harder, but because she stopped resisting the law and began obeying it. Hear me, you cannot beg your way out of debt. You must speak your way back into law. Debt is not an enemy, but it is exacting. It will remain until the imbalance it reflects is corrected, not through effort, but through spoken jurisdiction. If you gave in fear, retrieve your peace. If you received in guilt, retrieve your joy. If you held back your tithe, return your trust. If you cursed the bills, revoke the curse and issue blessing. There is nothing mystical about this. The law is legal. What you say is filed. What you repeat is executed. What you fear is endorsed. You have the right to speak again. You have the right to overturn verdicts you spoke in haste. You have the right to replace every debt not with denial, but with decree. The world may write you a contract of debt, but heaven has already signed a higher law, perfect return through right exchange. Let that be the structure. Let that be the voice. Let that be the only balance you serve. Speak now. I do not submit to fear. I do not glorify imbalance. I honor the rhythm of law. I receive clean. I release pure. I owe no man anything but love, and the law restores in full, without delay, without remainder, without resistance. You are not condemned, you are corrected, and the correction is spoken. Fear is not weakness. It is worship in the wrong direction. Most people believe fear is passive, that it comes uninvited, that it strikes like weather. But fear is chosen, confirmed, and repeatedly spoken into law. It is not lack, it is allegiance to lack. It is not the absence of good, it is the presence of conviction that good is absent. And conviction is always creative. Conviction makes things so. Every time you speak of being afraid of debt, afraid of bills, afraid of running out, you are not merely expressing emotion. You are transferring power. You are appointing fear as governor over your finances. And what you appoint, the law obeys. The law does not parse motive. It does not ask whether you meant it. It listens for authority. It receives what is repeated. It returns what is broadcast. And fear, once sustained, becomes a command. Many people have faith in reverse. They rehearse outcomes they do not want. They imagine disaster with precision. They meditate on what will go wrong. And they believe it has value, calling it caution, calling it realism. But the law is not concerned with their reasoning. It is only concerned with their signal. And fear, cloaked in language of responsibility, is still fear. Faith and fear are not opposites in strength. They are equal in power, pointed in opposite directions. The same force that brings fulfillment when inverted brings erosion. The same certainty that opens doors when twisted shuts them. Fear is not the shadow of faith, it is its misuse. This is why fear must never be managed. It must be dismissed. You do not counsel with fear. You do not explain things to fear. You do not wait for fear to pass. You issue judgment against it. Because as long as you feel into it, you leave it seated. And what remains seated remains sovereign. The debt you fear is not the problem. The fear you serve is. And service is not measured by words, but by obedience. The one who adjusts their behavior to accommodate fear has already called it Lord. When a man says, "I fear I can't pay this debt," he is not describing a feeling. He is issuing a decree. He is placing a seal on the outcome, broadcasting a judgment into his own provision. When a woman says, "I'm afraid of not having enough," she is invoking absence by name. These are not exaggerations. These are statements of spiritual legality, and they will be returned in full. You cannot declare abundance while submitting to fear. You cannot attract supply while protecting doubt. You cannot speak of divine compensation in the morning and speak of financial anxiety by noon and expect clarity to prevail. The law does not respond to mixture. It responds to dominance. Whatever vibration you grant majority is what the law takes as true. And in most lives, fear is dominant, not by accident, but by repetition. This repetition is subtle. It hides behind disclaimers. It masks as humility. It wears the costume of being realistic. But it does not fool the subconscious. The subconscious obeys tone. It obeys atmosphere. It hears lack even when the mouth tries to frame it nicely. And once heard, it begins execution. There is no spiritual neutrality. Every thought is a vote. Every word is a signature. Every belief is a seed. If you have been afraid, you have been planting. And the harvest cannot be denied, but it can be uprooted. That uprooting begins when fear is no longer indulged as emotion, but rejected as false command. You are not required to heal your fear. You are required to withdraw its jurisdiction. This is not emotional work. This is legal revision. You do not fight fear by force. You dissolve its structure by removing agreement. You must speak, not to calm yourself, but to overturn the judgment. You must say, "This fear is not mine. It is not rooted in divine mind. It has no record in the law. I withdraw permission for it to rule. I am governed only by truth, and truth declares, I am fully supported, fully supplied, and fully paid." Then, you do not wait to feel peace. You act as though the word is already functioning, because it is. The law does not need your panic. It does not need your striving. It waits for your certainty. And when that certainty is spoken, not whispered, not questioned, but spoken with command, every structure that served fear begins to fall. You will not always see this collapse immediately, but you will feel the shift in jurisdiction. And once the jurisdiction has changed, all forms will submit. Fear is no longer welcome as protector. It is exposed as saboteur. Fear is no longer permitted to delay. It is identified as deception. Fear is no longer allowed to linger. It is recognized as betrayal of truth. The law was never governed by your fear. It only paused until you revoked it. But now that the revocation has been spoken, the law has no reason to wait. Speak this not with tremble, but with weight. I owe no debt to fear. I do not tithe to lack. I revoke all worship of insufficiency. I serve one law. I speak one truth. And that truth provides. This is not comfort, it is correction. And correction, once spoken, clears the field for supply to flow again. Debt does not respond to emotion. It is not impressed by struggle, nor persuaded by good intention. You cannot cancel a spiritual imbalance by worrying harder. You cannot erase a decree by feeling sorry for it. The law does not operate on apology. It operates on authority. And until that authority is spoken, structure remains unchanged. Panic is not a substitute for jurisdiction. Stress is not an offering. Desperation is not a key. The universe is not moved by how much pain you feel about what you owe. It is moved by whether or not you have corrected the statement that allowed the imbalance to take root. Many try to earn their release from debt through exhaustion. They work tirelessly, overcompensate in relationships, say yes to what they cannot afford, and silently beg for mercy through performance. But spiritual law is not manipulated by exhaustion. It is not softened by sacrifice made outside of structure. What is not spoken cannot be corrected, and what is not corrected remains lawful. You may believe you are being responsible by worrying. You may believe anxiety proves you care. But fear, no matter how dressed, is still fear. And fear does not cancel contracts. It renews them. Every time you say, "I just don't know how this will be paid," you are not inviting clarity. You are invoking chaos. Every time you speak delay, you sign delay. Every time you confess uncertainty, you authorize a pause. The law does not interpret for you. It does not correct what you said. It does not ask what you meant. It delivers what you confirmed. This is the hidden burden of those who fear debt. They speak of it more than they speak of provision. They re-announce their condition daily. They repeat phrases of insufficiency with precision and ritual. "This is too much. I'll never catch up. They're charging me interest. I can't breathe." These sentences are not merely expressions of emotion. They are inscriptions. They carve grooves into the invisible. They become the channels through which life continues to flow, no matter how much they resist it. A man may want to be free, but if his words are bound, his world remains bound with him. And here is the trap. The more afraid you become of debt, the more you serve it, not just practically, but spiritually. You place your attention, your speech, your daily meditation into the very pattern you want to dissolve. You begin praying from fear, declaring from fear, giving out of fear, and refusing to spend, not out of wisdom, but out of contraction. And the law, being exact, reflects that contraction back into form. So even when money does arrive, it feels small. It feels rushed. It feels like it disappears too fast. Not because it is cursed, but because the frequency receiving it was not pure. Debt is not just about numbers. It is about the sound that surrounds those numbers. It is about the tone that governs your interaction with the bill, the voice you speak when checking your balance, the vibration in your body when you release payment. All of these are structures. All of these become part of the equation. If the tone is fear, the return will be delay. If the tone is reverence, the return will be flow. The law does not ask whether you smiled, it asks whether you aligned. To align does not mean to pretend, it does not mean to ignore what you owe. It means to stop giving fear legal custody over your accounts. It means to revoke every subconscious ritual that frames you as a victim of finance. It means to say with clarity, "I am not behind. I am recalibrating. I am not crushed. I am correcting. I am not lost. I am under new jurisdiction." And that jurisdiction is not based on effort, but decree. You may ask, but don't I still need to work hard? Don't I still need to find the money? And I say to you, work is a tool, not a source. Labor is a method, not a master. You are not being paid because you try hard. You are being responded to because you are in agreement with law. If your speech contradicts your effort will not produce peace. You will chase results with the mouth of a slave and the mind of an orphan. And no matter what you earn, you will still feel unpaid. So let the work begin in the tongue. Speak not to impress the world, but to restore the order of your inner government. Speak not as a motivational act, but as a jurisdictional one. Say what heaven already knows to be true, that you are already in the process of restoration, that every imbalance is subject to reversal, that every unpaid debt now stands before the court of divine right exchange, that you do not owe shame, you do not owe punishment, you do not owe explanations for your past, you owe only alignment, and once alignment is spoken, the structure will correct. When that structure corrects, you may feel the same bills, the same calls, the same balances, but the tone will be different. And that tone is the seed of the new cycle. You will no longer feel like a servant. You will no longer over-apologize. You will no longer look down when talking about money, because something deeper will have shifted. Not the balance sheet, but the voice behind it. Let this voice be your new position. I no longer beg for release. I issue correction. I do not look to the world to fix what I've misaligned. I speak restoration into being, and I submit to the law that fulfills what I declare. I am not asking for mercy. I am applying justice. I am not waiting for a break. I am activating return. And because I say so, it begins now. No debt is final when placed under the law of divine compensation. What man calls unpayable, heaven calls reversible. What the world calls permanent, the spirit calls temporary jurisdiction. You are not under the tyranny of numbers. You are not governed by the logic of the ledger. You are governed by what you speak, and what you speak determines what shall be restored. Every debt has two dimensions, the visible amount and the invisible cause. The visible amount can be measured in dollars, deadlines, and due dates. The invisible cause is measured in frequency, in alignment, in law. And it is that invisible cause that must be addressed first, because if not, the cycle continues. Even when you pay off one balance, another will appear. Even when you break free from one creditor, another form of lack will emerge. Not because you are cursed, but because the energetic pattern has not been canceled. Divine compensation is not a miracle. It is not random. It is not selective. It is not earned. It is a standing law. It is the natural result of spiritual realignment. When the inner law is restored, the outer circumstances are compelled to comply, and that restoration begins in speech, not in striving. You do not earn divine compensation through effort. You do not convince the law to favor you through sorrow or service. You activate it by restoring rhythm, by correcting what was misaligned, and by allowing heaven to distribute the return as it sees fit. The return does not always come from the person who wronged you. It does not always come through the channel you expect. It may not be logical, but it will be lawful, and what is lawful must appear. You may be holding on to a story of how the debt began. You may be reciting the history of your mistake, your misstep, your misfortune, but the law does not operate on memory. It does not audit your past to determine how generous to be. It only searches for current speech. If your speech still aligns with punishment, it will preserve the imbalance. If your speech now aligns with restoration, it will erase the record. This is not emotional, it is judicial. The erasure of debt is not a feeling, it is a legal consequence of spoken truth. You do not need to feel worthy to receive. You only need to stop confirming unworthiness. Worth is not a condition for provision. Alignment is. Many try to fix debt with morality. They try to be nicer, more generous, more selfless. They try to be a better person, thinking the universe will repay them in pity. But law is not sentimental. It is structural. It responds not to your effort to prove you've changed, but to your willingness to speak as one already restored. The past is not holding your provision hostage. Your agreement with the past is. The moment you stop justifying why you're still in lack, the law begins to reverse what once felt irreversible. You may say, but I owe this money. It's real. Yes, it is real in the realm of form, but form does not precede spirit. Spirit precedes form. And if spirit is corrected, the form must follow. You are not denying the existence of the bill. You are denying the finality of it. You are not ignoring responsibility. You are reassigning spiritual jurisdiction. The moment you say this debt is now corrected under divine compensation, you are issuing a lawful override. You are not canceling a payment. You are canceling the power it once held to rule you, and from that space, you can act calmly, clearly, without desperation. This is why I tell people, never pay a bill in fear. Never submit a payment with panic in your voice or dread in your gut. That is not payment. That is spiritual tax to lack. That is reinforcing the idea that what leaves your hand leaves your world. But when you pay under the law, you declare, this payment is seed, this transaction is sacred, and what leaves multiplies. And so it does. Divine compensation ensures that what you release in alignment does not disappear. It returns through channels you did not open. It returns through doors you did not knock on. It returns because the law has no interest in subtraction. It exists to complete the circuit. You may have debts that feel insurmountable, but no amount is too large for restoration. There is no such thing as a number beyond spiritual correction. The law does not calculate difficulty. It only confirms identity. If you still identify as someone trying to catch up, the law will support your striving. If you identify as one whose debts are actively being resolved by higher compensation, the law will support your supply. The identity precedes the solution. Speak not as one under pressure. Speak as one under restoration. The most common mistake I have seen in those seeking provision is this: they keep speaking their need. They think the more clearly they describe their condition, the more the universe will understand. But the universe does not answer need. It answers structure. It does not reply to emotional urgency. It replies to legal alignment. The longer you affirm the weight, the longer you carry it. The moment you shift your tone from plea to proclamation, the balance begins to move. And the movement may begin invisibly, but the form will obey. Because form cannot resist spiritual order. You are not here to struggle. You are not meant to pay forever for a mistake already corrected in spirit. The law does not double charge. It does not punish in installments. Once restoration is claimed, once the cause has been addressed, once the spiritual structure has been rebuilt through your word, the obligation is lifted. Not denied, not ignored, lifted. Paid by the higher court. Settled through unseen channels. Resolved in perfect timing. That is divine compensation, not a vague hope, but an enforced verdict. You must stop delaying what has already been declared. Stop waiting for permission to speak as free. Stop wondering whether it's too soon to rejoice. It is never too soon to confirm truth. And truth is this: no debt is permanent under law. No imbalance is eternal under correction. No payment made in faith goes unmultiplied. Every debt is wiped out, not by guilt, not by effort, not by time, but by spiritual realignment. And by the voice that dares to say, I do not live under the law of effort, I live under the law of completion. The mistake most people make is this: they keep describing the situation, thinking it's honest. They believe that giving voice to the facts is necessary, that if they don't say how bad it is, they're lying. But in spiritual law, you are not required to honor conditions. You are required to establish structure. You are not called to repeat what is seen. You are called to replace it with what is spoken. The law is not built on facts. It is built on declarations. And those declarations, once made, begin to rewire the form, regardless of how real the form seems today. When you speak about what's happening, you reinforce its standing. Every time you say, I have no money, you place another brick on the wall of lack. Every time you explain it's just not working right now, you sign the delay into contract again. Even if you say it quietly, even if you say it with pain in your chest, even if you say it to be realistic, the result is the same. The law hears a command. It does not ask whether you're venting. It does not evaluate your emotion. It logs the structure, and structure once confirmed must be returned. What you call telling the truth is often just restating a temporary condition as if it were eternal. But spiritual law knows no permanence in form. The only thing permanent is pattern, and what you describe most frequently becomes the pattern your world is shaped by. You are not punished for your honesty, but you are bound by what you give legal form to. This is not moralism. It is mechanics. The world you experience is not a reflection of what you feel. It is a reflection of what you continually define as real. Some people are proud of how accurately they describe their problems. They know every number in their bank account. They can list every obstacle, every delay, every difficulty with perfect recall. But their vocabulary has become a prison. Their voice, instead of delivering them, now defends their bondage. And the more they repeat the problem, the deeper the roots grow. Not because they are wrong, but because they are consistent. And the law always honors consistency. This is why I tell you, stop reporting. Start ruling. You were not placed on earth to be a commentator of chaos. You were sent to be a speaker of law. You were not assigned to repeat what is failing. You were appointed to speak what restores. Your job is not to describe the walls. Your job is to say, let there be light, because until the structure is changed, the situation remains. And situations do not shift through observation, they shift through jurisdiction. You may say, "But Florence, I need to be honest about where I am." And I say, your location is not the issue. Your agreement is. If you are temporarily in lack, that does not require your loyalty. If you are facing a payment you cannot yet see a way to meet, that does not mean you must bless the fear with repetition. To speak the structure means you speak from truth, not from reaction. Truth does not deny that the bill exists. Truth simply denies that the bill has the final word. Truth does not erase the fact that your bank account shows little. It erases the idea that your value and future are tied to that number. Speaking from structure means you say what governs all things, not what appears to be governing now. This is the voice of law. I do not speak what delays, I speak what replaces. I do not repeat the news, I issue the decree. I do not describe what the world has declared, I declare what heaven is allowed to build. And because I declare it, it begins, whether I feel it or not, whether I see it or not, whether the male agrees or not. The structure does not respond to the mood. It responds to the mandate. Let me be clear. Situations change all the time, and that is precisely why you must not build your vocabulary around them. What you say should outlast what you see. What you speak should not just describe, but architect. Your speech is not decoration, it is blueprint. Every phrase becomes a line in the foundation of your provision. And you cannot build a stable dwelling while alternating between truth and terror. You may think, well, I'm just being cautious. But caution is often code for fear dressed up in logic. You may think, but I'm trying to be realistic. But reality, when spoken without alignment, becomes ritual. And ritual repeated without law becomes bondage. There is no virtue in saying what lacks structure. There is no holiness in repeating what heaven has not spoken. You are not more honest when you confirm disorder. You are only more entangled. So what do you speak? You speak the law, not the lack. You speak the compensation, not the collection. You speak the release, not the record. And when someone asks how things are going, you do not owe them your symptoms. You owe your calling. You do not have to explain your hardship to be seen. You speak your alignment to be free. And freedom is always more costly than pity. It will feel unnatural at first. You will want to add a disclaimer. You will want to say, well, it's still tough, but I'm hoping for the best. That is not structure. That is hedging. And the law does not honor split declarations. It waits for singleness. Not perfection of vocabulary, but purity of intent. Do not mix your decree with apology. Speak what is law and leave it standing. You are not called to echo your surroundings. You are called to out-declare them. You are not responsible to repeat statistics. You are responsible to create conditions, and that creation happens not in your hands, but in your mouth. The mouth was not given just for reaction. It was given to establish reality, and what you establish will be built. So speak, not from the view of the paper in your hand, but from the document that heaven has written. You are not the balance due. You are the voice of restoration. You are not the one reporting the delay. You are the one declaring return. You are not the summary of transactions. You are the source of correction, and the correction has already begun. There is no such thing as a permanent record in the spirit unless you continue to speak it. The law does not hold grudges. The law does not carry your past forward. It carries only your present declaration. Every statement is a seal. Every repetition, a stamp. Every word spoken in conviction becomes an official entry in the unseen. And once recorded, the system will obey. But the record is not closed until you say so. Until you declare the case settled, the court remains open. Until you release the evidence you've been rehearsing, the judgment remains pending. And until you say with full authority, this matter is resolved, the energy continues to circulate. Most people unknowingly keep their spiritual debts active, not through action, but through memory. They think that by remembering the wound, they are being responsible. They think that by re-explaining the failure, they are proving they've learned. But the law does not require your story. It requires your decision. And the decision is this: whether or not the record shall remain open. You are not at the mercy of what happened. You are at the mercy of what you repeat. If you continue to speak from the posture of one still owing, still at fault, still under pressure, still seeking forgiveness, then the ledger remains active because you have confirmed that the case is not yet finished. But the case can be finished in a sentence, not because it erases responsibility, but because it restores alignment. The purpose of law is not to punish, but to correct. And correction, once received, is sufficient. The moment you stop speaking in terms of guilt and begin speaking in terms of right standing, the system begins to clear. The accounts begin to close. The invisible pressure begins to lift. Because the record is closed when the voice that created it decides to reverse it. This is not fantasy. This is divine order. Heaven does not demand ongoing apology. It demands structural authority. You are not forgiven by begging. You are forgiven by correction. The law does not hold power over you unless you hand it the pen. But most people give away the pen every time they say, "I'm still trying," or "I probably deserve this," or "I can't expect too much right now." These are not humble statements. These are open records. These are declarations that the sentence has not yet been served, that the verdict has not been fulfilled. And so the energy keeps echoing, even when the lesson has been learned. Let me make it plain. You cannot serve both restoration and remembrance. You cannot speak healing while anchoring your identity in the debt you once carried. You cannot issue a new decree while rehearsing the old one. The law is just, but it is not sentimental. It does not choose which version of you to believe. It confirms the one you speak most clearly, and that version becomes the operative identity. If you speak as the one who is still processing pain, the law grants you more room to process. If you speak as the one who is now aligned, restored, and governed by truth, the law grants you the full restoration of that identity. You do not owe anyone a detailed explanation of how you got here. You do not need to prove how sorry you are, how hard you've worked, or how far you've come. The law does not tally tears. It tallies speech, and it waits only for the final command, not the emotional one, not the hopeful one, but the definitive one. When that command is spoken, the gates open. The balance clears. The voice is no longer under review. It becomes ruling, and that ruling rewrites the atmosphere. You are not here to keep talking about the debt. You are here to declare its closure. You are not here to carry records that heaven has already expunged. You are here to say what heaven has been waiting to confirm, that your account is clean, your structure is aligned, and your word is now final. When you speak from that place, everything that once echoed in disorder begins to dissolve. The patterns that once repeated begin to break. The limitations that once felt logical begin to fall apart, not because time passed, but because you closed the record with law. You may feel traces of the old energy, you may hear echoes of the old voice, but you do not owe it your repetition. You do not owe it your agreement. You do not owe it your attention. What is no longer true does not require further explanation, and what has been corrected does not require memorial. The only ritual you now perform is the ritual of dominion. Waking up and speaking from the throne of identity, not the pit of apology. Say this, not as affirmation, not as motivation, but as verdict. I hereby revoke all previous declarations that confirmed lack. I withdraw all records that identified me as one who owes, one who is behind, one who must plead for restoration. I no longer submit reports of insufficiency. I no longer serve the narrative of being under pressure, behind schedule, or off track. I stand in right exchange. I speak in lawful tone. I move in perfect alignment. And from this moment forward, all records of lack are now closed. I do not revisit them. I do not rehearse them. I do not revive them. The law has received my word, and the system is now ordered accordingly. This is not poetry. This is protocol. You are not defined by what was missing. You are not bound by what was said before you knew. You are not still waiting for the door to open. You are standing in the center of lawful return. And the only question now is whether you will confirm it daily or allow the silence of your tongue to call the past back into service. But you know what to do. Speak now, not with desperation, not with ceremony, but with precision. Say it once. Say it as judge. Say it as one who knows the power of the voice and the finality of correction. And when it is said, say no more. The law will take it from there.